Hello everyone, welcome again to the Tea Crane. I'm here with Linnea, and today we are going to be chatting about a topic suggestion that we got in last week's live. Last week we were asked to talk a little bit about fire. Now that's a very broad topic, so I said we'll just touch on it in a next chat. And I think that's what we'll be doing today. Um, So I will let you lead in some of the questions and just come up with some ideas that we can discuss about fire and how it could relate to tea, in which ways that fire can relate to tea. And of course, if you have any questions that relate also to fire and tea, of course, then I'd be happy to see them appear in the comments, and we can also take those on and address those during the talk. So I will also put up a banner on the screen saying send in your questions about fire and tea. I think that's a clear enough explanation, and I'm going to set that as a scroller. There it goes. So send in your questions about fire and tea. If you have any questions, then that will also help us develop the topic a bit more and maybe touch on aspects that we haven't thought of. I think we've got a few ideas now. So, well, let's hear it. In the meanwhile, I'm going to be brewing some tea, which we'll also be talking about later. But first, fire.
Fire. All right, yeah, like you said, we had this suggestion in last week's chat. Thank you for the question, by the way. So yeah, the topic that we'll be covering specifically is sort of when and how and what kind of fire is used during the tea processing process.
So we'll start with the processing, okay.
Yeah, and if there's any other parts where fire is used, then we can maybe talk about that later.
Yeah, processing, interesting.
Yeah, so I think all tea needs to be heated at some point during the process.
Yes. So very simply, processing tea is basically the different steps of extracting the moisture out of the tea and drying it, which is usually done by heating the tea. And so let's take sencha, for example. There are several stages in which the tea is rolled. And rolling the tea extracts the saps, and then if heat is added, the saps that are extracted from that leaf are heated up and they evaporate. So that is how they get rid of moisture and eventually start drying out the leaf. If we begin, of course, green tea always needs to be heat processed before the manufacturing happens.
So that the oxidation gets stopped, right?
So that the oxidation is halted. And with sencha, that happens through steam. With kamairicha, for example, that happens by bringing the tea leaf in contact with a heated metal surface through which it is then heated, parched,
pan-fried,
pan-fired,
different
fired. Pan-fried, pan-fired, different names, different ways of expressing that. So kamairicha is pan-fired, pan-fried tea. And here already we see a difference in application and a difference in how heat or fire can affect the tea. Because for sencha, when you steam the leaf, fire is used to heat up the water, create the steam, and then
the steam is what is applied to the leaf.
The steam is what is applied to the leaf, which then also again adds moisture. With pan firing, very interestingly, what happens is that there's a source of heat that is under the frying pan that is then brought in contact with the tea leaf, and through that contact the leaf starts to heat up. And usually, because that is well, we'll get to that as well. But first, what happens, the leaf starts to heat up, and it heats up from the inside. where through it starts to release its saps onto the surface. Those saps get into contact with the
pan, and
the
they
pan.
start steaming as well, right?
And that turns into steam, which is then used, well, which then happens to steam the leaf again further. So it gets sort of steamed in its own saps. There's no addition of water, which is considered more beneficial if you think of tea as just simply drying the leaf.
Yeah, it's a bit more efficient
Then it's more efficient. Exactly.
not add more of that water.
I'm going to need to get a cup for you, though.
Oh yes, please.
So
and kamairi cha has a little bit of a added sort of nutty flavor almost, which is very subtle, I think. Is there any other real purpose to pan firing versus steaming the tea, or is it just a different technique? Does it have
it's
a different effect?
It's a different technique that also came to Japan in a different stage. So it's more tradition really, as opposed to, well, tradition and culture and history, as opposed to it being something that is done with purpose.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, many Chinese teas are pan-fired rather than steamed.
Pan-firing teas is really something you can do with household equipment. People had the stuff that they needed to make kamairi cha at home. They have a pan. Well, basically, if you have a big wok pan, then you just throw the leaf in there, parch it, knead it a little bit, parch it a bit further, make sure it's dry, and you have your tea. Whereas with sencha, that process is really developed to create an exquisite tea.
It's
you
more, can't really make it at home as easily.
You don't really know. It's a bit difficult to make it at home. You could,
but it's just the equipment is not really as.
Well, as we've seen last time when we went to Ujidawara, there's this big table that is then heated from underneath that is used to knead and roll the tea also in different stages. So here, let's go back to the different modes of fire that are actually used during those stages. Because most tea factories now apply gas burners. Gas burners or electricity is what they use. But some of the farmers that I work with like to use a wood fire under their kama.
And that's for both pan firing and steaming, if they...
No, they only do pan firing.
They only do pan firing.
Some of the kamairi-cha producers that I know, they only do pan firing. And they like to use a wood fire, which they say is better because of the type of heat. You have two types of heat, which is far infrared and infrared. And if I remember correctly, it's far infrared that is produced from a wood fire, which penetrates deeper into the object that is being heated and heats it up from the inside out. Whereas infrared heating, like especially what you have with electricity, it just heats it from the outside. And it takes a time for it to go to the center. And for kamairi-cha, basically what you want is to get the saps out from the inside out. So using a far infrared heating source is better. And it heats the tea up it heats the leaf in a much better way. Now that also applies to water. Nowadays in tea ceremony, we use electrical fires as well as charcoal fires.
Right?
And the charcoal, you can really see a difference between electricity and charcoal. With charcoal, you have a thicker plume of smoke coming out of the kettle when you boil your water. Whereas with an electrical fire, it's thin. I don't know what you would call that. It's not a plume.
Little seep.
It's like thin things that come out of tin smoke. Let's just say tin smoke. So for some reason, probably the electricity heats the water up from the outside, and then that gets warmed up and it evaporates. And it's not entirely heated, which with charcoal probably then does happen because of the density of the smoke that it gets. Probably because the charcoal heat then also reaching more of the water in the kettle. So the sound is completely different of the kettle. The smoke is completely different, and also the deliciousness of the water. It's softer.
And it really affects the.
It's
flavor of
probably
the final
hotter with charcoal, but the electricity makes it feel as if it is hotter. Just because it's so superficially heated on the surface, probably just when you drink it, oh, it's so hot, which
It's not quite the same.
it's not quite the
sensation.
same. Oh, we've jumped already to
The end.
water and
the last step of the process.
well, in the process too, then there's different stages where the rolling happens, and the rolling then is mainly to beat the leaf like it is needed, and then extract the saps and again evaporate those further. That is how the processing goes. And then there's one last stage where the tea is also again, they call this the firing stage. And during that last stage, the leaf is further dried in sort of an oven kind of cabinet. You've got different shelves that are put in, and then there's usually a gas fire down below. There's electrical ones as well, but usually a gas fire down below that heats the leaf and then dries it out further. And that is what gives, if that process is done longer, you get a stronger firing flavor. In Japanese, they call it the hika. And there are regions where it's just done, where it is done longer, and it becomes more aromatic. I wouldn't say nutty like kamairicha or toasty like hojicha or bancha, but just you have that fragrance from the firing that is added to it. And if the firing is done more shallowly, shorter, then you don't have as much of that, and you have more greenness. And it also depends on the region. Some regions are known for just being very rich in that final firing fragrance. And it depends on what you'd like, of course. There are wholesalers in Kyoto as well that finish their tea with a lot of firing. And then, as you said, kamairicha is again different in that way that one of the last stages of processing is also a firing stage, but in a kama, in a kettle, in a frying pan, in like a big wok.
Instead of in an oven.
Yes, and that gives it more of a nutty flavor, fragrance.
And if I recall correctly, you've mentioned that sometimes that final firing step is done by the wholesalers rather than the how to say the tea farmer, the original processing facility, as part of the kind of blending process.
Usually, the farmer processes the tea into an half-finished, a rough kind of tea, which still includes a little bit of moisture and is not completely dried out, but it's ready and able to be shipped.
And that's aracha, right?
That's aracha. And that is then how it is bought by the wholesaler producer. And each wholesaler producer has their own preference as to how to blend the tea. And some of them want to do the blending first and then fire that batch all together so that it's evenly fired. which if you fire them first, you can have different stages of firing, which is again something that other wholesaler producers might enjoy, because they can say this tea needs a bit more firing than that tea, and then they can balance that out and blend them together that way.
And I was wondering if that would be another technique, since some teas might need more or less firing.
So everyone has their sort of own, well, unique approach to it.
Oops.
How are you enjoying this tea?
It's good. Yeah, we can talk about that. The tea. This is a very light, sweet. It's a sencha, isn't it?
Yes, it's a sencha.
Right.
So it's the Nara native sencha that. Well, it's one of the teas that has been with the Tea Crane for the longest. It's I had this tea since the beginning. One of the first teas that I actually put on the website. Yes.
Way back in the website days, huh?
Way
Before
back.
You had the store.
Yeah.
The shop.
Yes. 7 years ago.
Wow.
And this one it's a favorite.
It is really good.
It's what I think really sencha should be, and what it was in the past as well. It's seed grown. It's from a single farm, so it's not blended. It's not fertilized. The farm is on a mountain flank, which means that it's completely natural. The soil also has its natural healthy topsoil, and the producer also does not fertilize it. He just brings leaf and branches from the neighboring forest onto the soil, so to keep it fertile and soft. But usually these seed-grown bushes, they go dig deep in the ground, and they go back to layers of soil that are centuries, millennia, maybe millennia old.
Wow.
And so we get that good nourishment from it. But well, it's again an interesting season, and maybe I should actually mention that as well. It's spring harvest, and every year in spring, of course, everyone gets happy about the new harvest, the new tea, and sort of begins to think that the older teas should sort of be discarded by this time. Well, that creates a problem for the Tea Crane, though, because first of all, older teas, like for example this one is from 2021, last year's spring harvest, and it's still super fresh.
It is very good still.
So
it's very sweet.
It's very sweet. It's a little bit more matured, but it's still very fresh. The leaf is still vibrantly green. The tea also comes out vibrantly green. It's almost as if it hasn't changed much. Maybe that little stinginess of the first harvest, the freshest harvest, it has disappeared, but it's still absolutely fresh. Now, most of the customers at the Tea Crane as well are now looking to get the 2022 harvest. So I actually still have quite a lot of this tea, and I still have quite a lot of other teas, but they are not as much in demand. And of course, I can understand that from the common idea of how tea is perceived, but running the Tea Crane in the way that I do
creates a little bit of a problem.
It makes that a little bit problematic, because what I do is I indicate which year, with the ones that I know, I actually say it's picked on this day. And doing that, of course, now this year, then, that one is, so to say, old. We're not going to buy that anymore. And then being left with a lot of tea from the previous year, I begin to understand, and that's something that I really don't want to do, but I begin to understand why most conventional tea farms throughout Kyoto, throughout Japan entirely. And probably standard tea companies throughout the world blend their teas. Because what is common practice in Kyoto, and I'm sure that a lot of people also won't know that, common practice is in the Shincha season, the new harvest season, you have one or two products that a store brings out that are Shincha, first flush. This is the first flush. But then they have a line of 10 to 20 teas, products, different price categories and everything.
Their permanent collection.
Their permanent collection. Then usually they all go by the same name. They've got Gekko and Unkaku and whatever.
So, and those are the same every year.
And those basically retain the same flavor profile. And of course, everyone knows that, okay, that is done by blending. But what not everyone knows is that not only the fresh tea is blended to a certain extent so that it tastes like what it was last year, no, it's actually blended with last year's. So that what is left over is mixed in with the new harvest. There is consistency then. So people recognize the tea that they've been drinking because it's still in there. They get used to the new flavor profile as well. And you mix what the leftovers you have with the new tea and gradually transition.
And that's how you get tea that's not too old.
And that's how you can actually get through the tea that you also have in stock more. And so I, of course, don't want to do that. I don't want to do blending or anything. But I do have, well, teas that remain. And that is a little bit of a problem if everyone now says, well, we don't want the teas from 2021 anymore. Now you have to buy 2022 and we want them as soon as possible. So get a move on and bring us those teas. I would very much like to. I am in course of doing that. But I would also like to ask everyone to not disregard the 2021 teas. These are still very good, still very delicious, and it'd be a waste if I, well, we just have them standing here on my shelf. So don't only focus on the 2022 harvest. Give those teas from last year some love too, please. Cheers.
There's still a lot, quite a big selection still. Even though you don't get a lot of teas all at once, kind of build up a good variety.
Well, I have my standard series as well. So I have sencha from different regions. Of course, there's Mandokoro, there's Kasuga, there's Asamiya, there's the Nara senchas, there's the one from Kagoshima by the Imuta Lake. I mean, there's different places that I work together with. And of course, I will be accumulating also those teas from this year. But I'm going to have to do it at a slower pace, both because of the large stock that I still have of those teas. So I'll be offering a few fresh new teas. Mandokoro is going to come up. Kasuga will be here soon. Nara Zaidai Sencha is going to come in as well. So I'll have a few teas of which I'm going to carry the 2022 harvest as soon as possible. But for the ones that I still have a lot in stock of the last year's harvest, I'm, well, not necessarily going to switch them around very soon.
Sell out the previous harvest first.
Because, yeah, the previous harvest is still there. And also, well, having had issues with shipping and all those things, including the customs fees being raised by Europe and
issues with the post office not shipping
the post office not shipping packages, all that, I've, well, lost quite some revenue and also lost quite some purchasing capacity. So I'm going to have to do it at a slower pace. Just so you know that the tea will change around. I'm going to have to look for a new system, what to do, of course, with if I have tea left over from the last year, because, well, that could turn into a problem for the next years as well, because I have to get a stock, but don't know how much really I'm going to have to. Well, of course, if you have suggestions,
We'd love to hear them.
Not a given that I'm absolutely going to follow through on them, but I'd be happy to, well, yeah, get some feedback, get some ideas maybe.
What was I just about to say? I forgot.
You forgot. Let's have some more tea then.
Sounds good to me. And before we finish, there was one more step about firing that I wanted to mention a little bit. That's about roasted teas like hojicha and bancha that you mentioned.
Aha.
Is that part of the final firing step? Is it just an extended firing step, or is there an extra step, or is it a totally different final end of the process? What's going on there?
So usually bancha is processed the same way as sencha. Then it's dried and fired and everything until it's a fresh green tea, and then it's roasted. So there's a final additional roasting stage that is post-processing. So bancha is usually made in post-processing, and of course you have different applications there as well, which creates different types of bancha.
Right.
But bancha and hojicha are well, roasted. Really, you could actually make it in a frying pan at home if you have some old sencha left. You could just throw it in a frying pan, put it on the fire, and roast it. And that is basically how most hojicha are also made.
Right.
So just a simple roasting process.
So there's a point at which bancha was sencha. Maybe not with the first flush, or maybe it's a...
Yeah, it's usually...
Maybe not quite sencha, but it's depending on the bancha, of course.
Be careful with what you say, because you tend to get into topics that take us another route.
All right, we'll forget about that.
Because
is there...
bancha...
Right, there's a lot of different kinds of bancha.
I devoted an entire chapter to it in my book. Well, not as many pages, but there are different kinds of bancha. Basically, what I translate bancha as is the other, miscellaneous. So it's like you have sencha, kabusecha, gyokuro, and you've got all these things, and then you have bancha. It's all that is not this. So
there's not really any standard.
Not quite. No, there's not. This is what bancha is. If you go to different places in Japan, different prefectures, in every prefecture, if you say, please give me some bancha, you'll get something different. You get hojicha in the north, you get kyobancha in Kyoto, you get something sour in Shikoku. It's funny. In Shizuoka, you get something green. So it's just, it's like old coarse leaf processed into sencha. And you get that.
And they call that bancha.
That's bancha. So it's bancha has different things. It's in between harvest. It's cut-offs before harvest. It's later harvest coarse leaves.
It's leaves that you just go out and pick off the ground and put on a fire, like kyobancha looks like.
Almost. It's
not quite.
Coarse leaf that is filtered out in the processing stage. So you've got the atama, that are the biggest large leaves that are in top sieve. That is used for bancha. Bancha can be roasted. It can also be not roasted. Bancha can also be post-processed fermented. So
great. That's what they do in
Shikoku.
Shikoku, right?
Yes. So you have that. There's a whole other world of bancha. I think if you want to look into local food and drink culture throughout Japan, then bancha is a very interesting segue into learning more about that culture. It's very local. It's getting into local food and drink culture in Japan. Bancha is a good way in, which we could maybe devote another talk to another time.
Yeah. Kyobancha is actually one of my favorites. So
people love it or hate it.
Yep, it's very
dividing. Yeah. Some people say it's an ashtray. Other people say it smells like a freshly cleaned hospital.
All right, to each their own.
There's different approaches to it, and other people just say it's lovely. I like the fragrance, the aroma. It's a bit sweet. There's different ways to approach brewing it as well, and yeah, people in Kyoto love it.
How do you feel about it?
I enjoy it, and I'm very happy actually to have found one that is pesticide free, because usually bancha is the garbage from all different tea farms, basically big coarse tea leaf that they bring to one factory, and in that factory, all those leaves are processed together, so you don't know where it came from, who's. It's all just one big grouping together of leaf from all over the place. So you don't know if it's got pesticides or not, if it's been fertilized in a certain way, or
what cultivar it is.
But the cultivar is not even that. It's just a pile of leaf from all over the place.
And then the farmers who brought the tea don't even get their same tea leaves back. They just get.
No, they don't get their same tea leaves back. They get
a share,
an allocation of what they brought.
The communal bancha.
Yes, exactly. So the producer that I work with has been able to convince a kyobancha producer to produce kyobancha only with her tea leaf. So she brings her pesticide-free tea leaf, it's processed, and then she gets that tea leaf back. So we've got a kyobancha that is safe, free from pesticides, and also super delicious, because it is one of the kyobancha that is, I would say, most highly smoked.
Oh,
it's
that's
one
right.
of the most intense ones.
I might have tried a bancha here. I assume it was that one. Yeah, very,
Probably
very smoky.
the only one that I have.
Right.
For kyobancha, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I know that Ippodo is another tea store in Kyoto, and a lot of people love their kyobancha. Actually, the producer that of the kyobancha that this farmer uses is the same as the producer for that particular kyobancha from that particular tea store. So it's as intensely smoky as the one from over there.
Oh, really? Usually I would expect a big brand like that to have a little bit milder flavor.
No, they're one of the smokiest.
Good. It's good.
I
like smoky kyobancha.
I have to admit, though, that when I was working for a tea store in Uji, they also had kyobancha, but I would go out of my way to buy kyobancha there, brew that in the morning at home, put it in a big bottle, take it to the tea store that I was working at, and drink that instead of the kyobancha they had standing on the table for everyone. Not that I didn't like it, but I just appreciate the smokiness more of that one.
Yes. Well, like you said, people either love it or hate it. So kind of have to accommodate different people's tastes.
Yes. If you place an order in anytime soon, then, well, check out our kyobancha. It's available on this, the website. And I mean, if you don't like it, so be it. Let's not cry over spilled milk. It's an educational experience. You've learned something new, and you've had a taste of culture. I think with tea, that is what you need to do. You need to buy different teas and then see what you like, what you don't like, brew it in different ways, and experiment. Play with it.
Yeah,
enjoy.
We talked about this. I think it's one of my favorite parts of tea, but also one of the most intimidating parts of tea for, I mean, mostly beginners, people who are just getting into tea, but anybody really. It's really just so personal. You can't go to somebody and say, which tea should I try and how should I brew it and how often should I drink it? You really have to discover that for yourself.
Yes. And everyone has different preferences. So, got a question here. Where can I get good matcha online or offline.
Ooh,
You can get very good matcha online at www.the-t-crane.com. The Tea Crane. We've got a whole selection of organic, natural, pesticide-free matcha throughout Japan, and I think we've got some of the best matcha for preparation of koicha as well. So I would definitely check out the Tea Crane, and I'm sure you'll find your liking there. So have a look at our homepage, please. All right, I think that's it for today. We're soon going to have to open store again. It sounds as if Japan is going to start opening soon. So
fingers crossed.
Visit me in Kyoto.
Yes.
Or first come to Japan, then come visit me in Kyoto.
Well, hopefully that also means that you'll be able to ship things a little bit more easily because the post office will ship packages soon. Maybe, hopefully, who knows?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers
the only
crossed.
information that I have is that tourists might be coming back.
Right. Well, and the post office has said that the reason they don't ship anymore for now is because they don't have enough planes, because there's no passenger planes and no tourists. So assuming that's the actual reason, then that problem will be soon.
Yes, if there's more travel, then there's more planes, then there's more
packages, more
packages.
shipping, more tea.
Let's hope for everything to sort of finally start easing up a little bit and give us some more breathing space and allow us to do some business again and ship you some great teas, have more relaxing moments with delicious new fresh specimens, and then I hope I can start accumulating some more of those delicious 2022 teas as well, together with the old selection of somewhat more vintage style but also still very good teas. I mean, we've been enjoying the sencha very, very much. The leaf is still very green. It's very bright. It's very
good.
Delicious. So there's someone who's asking, how much time can I store my tea? You could store your tea, depending on how you store it, very long. But once you've opened the package, I would suggest to drink it as soon as possible. So once you've opened it and have it come in contact with temperature, have it come in contact with air, then it's going to start oxidizing, and you want to consume it as quickly as possible. But as long as the package is sealed and it's in a package that is, also does not allow direct sunlight in, is pretty good with keeping the heat away. Maybe you're keeping it in a fridge or a freezer, then it will last quite a while. Some teas might grow more vintage and they might age over time a little bit. I like experimenting with aging teas. I've had sencha from 2017 that was still very good, very delicious.
But
it depends also on how they age. Not every tea ages the same way.
Right. But I hear a lot of people ask, when will my tea go bad? Tea won't really go bad. Like, it won't really, it
will just lose flavor.
It'll lose flavor, but it won't, unless it's got something in it, like it might mold, but that's pretty obvious.
Probably if you let some moisture in.
If you let moisture in, but it'll be pretty obvious if there is mold or something in the tea. But it doesn't really go bad, it just loses flavor.
Yes. Or absorb other flavors, but generally it's not going to go bad to the extent that
you need to not drink it.
Throw it away.
And if you do have very old tea that you don't like, we have a page about how to use those tea leaves in other ways. So don't throw them out. Don't throw them out, even if they don't taste good. There's plenty of things that you can do with them.
You can use them for dyeing. You can use them for deodoration, cleaning, all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff, yeah.
I also use them for cleaning purposes, etc. You could put them in old stinky socks and get them all smelling nice again. All right, I think we have to get going now.
Yes.
So thanks for your questions. Thanks for the interaction. Always happy to chat with you. So I hope you'll be looking forward to our next chat as well. And for now, have a nice week and enjoy your tea.
Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.